Okay, we are finally live, a few minutes late here on a Tuesday night. I apologize for that. Glad we could finally get everything set up and ready to go. Sometimes the technology works and sometimes it doesn't. And this, fortunately, is one of those times when I think we finally, well, it's unfortunately one of those times when the technology took its sweet time to get going. But now we are locked and loaded, ready to roll, whatever you want to use as your cliche. I've been dealing with the technology so much that, or trying to get these computers to work so much that I'm fresh out of cliches. So if you have a cliche you want to use, feel free to insert it here. Welcome to the Panther-Lair Show for Tuesday, April 27th. We are live here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Make sure everybody knows that site. I mean, you need to be at Panther-Lair.com, the actual website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. But you also, to make sure you never miss one of these live streams, you want to go to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I know a lot of people listen to the podcast through the week. I see the numbers. I appreciate everybody who listens just to the audio. But we definitely also very much appreciate everybody who checks in on Tuesday nights at 8:30 every week for the live stream recording of the podcast. I would say the fun part about it is that you can get into the chat and we can have a little back and forth and have a conversation. Kevin Plaucha, our guy, great friend of the program, friend of the site. See him all the time on Twitter, saying, what's up? Hope you're doing well. And you too, Kevin. We appreciate you checking in. Appreciate everybody who's already tuning in to the live stream. You got questions, you got comments about Pitt sports, throw it in the chat right there, and we will talk about it. You want to make sure your comment or your question gets answered. You can always be a super chatter. You throw a couple bucks at the podcast to support us. We appreciate that, and we will make sure we get to your comment and your questions. So, of course, we got to give our regular plugs, like homefieldapparel.com. You know, check them out. I got the Home Field Vintage Rock shirt on. That's going on right now. It's always a good look, super comfortable shirt, great design, great logo, and that's kind of that's how their products are. I mean, they make a really good product at Home Field. And they have a lot of great Pitt stuff, but they got a lot of great stuff for a lot of schools. And so homefieldapparel.com, you want to go check them out. They might, they've been rolling. They've been around for a while now. They got a lot of stuff for a lot of schools, like I said. And, in recent weeks, I think they've been rolling out some new products with some of the schools, some new shirts, some new designs, some new marks, as they call it in the business. I assume, I don't know, I'm not really in that business, but I assume they call it new marks. And they've been doing it for a lot of different schools. We'll see if they have anything coming for Pitt. So you definitely want to watch for that. Because, I mean, the stuff they already have for Pitt is great, but if they come out with something new, that would be even cooler, right? Homefieldapparel.com. Make sure you go check that out. And then, of course, the website. Like I said, I mean, you want to go to Panther-Lair.com. We do an hour here on Tuesday nights where we get together and talk about the podcast, and it's fun. It's great. We have a lot of fun with it. We have a lot of great conversations. But, I mean, everything we talk about here, we're talking about on Panther-Lair.com, on the message boards, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I mean, you can find it there all the time. Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. There's the content, the coverage, football, basketball, recruiting. We got baseball stuff up this week because the baseball team is pretty good shape. Mike Bell's got that program rolling along this year, and our guy Jim Hammett actually got an interview with Brendan Bear, a pitcher who signed with Pitt. He looks like a really good prospect, and had a really good article or a really good interview with Jim, and Jim wrote a really nice article on it. So go check that out. You can actually see it. If you're watching the live stream right there where I'm pointing, we got an image there. You can't click it. It's not a clickable link, but that's the article. Baseball commit likes what he sees from Pitt. Brendan Barry definitely likes what he sees. You'll probably like what you see if you go check out that article. So, make sure you go to Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com. Of course, a lot of the conversation in this week has been about Saturday, the Blue Gold game on at Heinz Field, and I think I got a lot of thoughts about that. I think you probably do too. If you have questions or comments about the Blue Gold game, what stood out to you, throw them in the chat and we will talk about it. And I imagine we'll probably cover a lot of I imagine what stood out to me is what stood out to you. But I'll tell you right off the bat, something that's been very interesting to me, and it's been interesting to me this whole offseason. I feel like I've touched on it every now and then, but I haven't really talked about it the way in depth or really kind of dug into it. It's been sort of an aside comment every now and then. What's been interesting to watch this offseason is how the football program has become like a source of optimism almost. You get the snide comments every now and then, but for the most part, people seem like they feel good about this program right now. And it's very interesting to me. They're coming off a 6-5 season. They had, 2 losses to the 2 best teams on their schedule beat the crap out of them. I mean, quite frankly, beat them into oblivion. They had those 2 losses. They also had 2 losses in games they probably should have won. Against teams they probably should have beat. Their offense was a major downfall of the team again. And there were no, there were no staff changes that Pitt chose to make in that regard to try and improve on that side of the ball. And so you have kind of a lot of the storylines that you had coming out of the 2019 season when there wasn't much optimism about Pitt in the offseason, where you didn't come out of the 2019 season feeling great. They went 8-5, had some bad losses like the Miami and Boston College games. They almost blew the Pizza Bowl or whatever that bowl game in Detroit is called, the one they played against Eastern Michigan where they didn't lead until the final minute. And the offense was a major issue, and there were no coaching changes on that side of the ball that you would look at and say, well, okay, they're trying to address those issues. And, you go throughout that offseason, it's not like there was a lot of optimism about what lay in store for the football program in 2020. Now, that offseason, all the offseason conversations and the offseason discussion and focus shifted pretty significantly last March when we didn't even know if there would be a season. But it was still, there wasn't a lot of good vibes about the football program last year at this time when we did talk about the possibility of a season. This year, it feels like it's different. Now, I will say that I think the football program is benefiting at least a little bit from the basketball program's disarray, or at least perceived disarray. I think, Pitt fans are looking at the hoop side and seeing a team that won 10 games that has, 5 transfers, some significant guys, 2 guys who left in the middle of the season, and so a lot of open spots and not really too many bodies lined up to fill those spots. Again, no coaching changes, after 3 years for Jeff Capel, 3 years that not a lot of, tangible success to write home about. And, so obviously there's a lot of negativity about the basketball program right now in the fan base. The fan base is very down on what's going on. And I think there's sort of a feeling of by comparison. By comparison, the football program looks like it's in good shape right now. They've got stability with Pat Narduzzi. They've got, they had Jalen Twyman opt out before the season. They had Paris Ford leave the team at midseason. But they got the most out of guys like Rashad Weaver and Patrick Jones and all that. I think so I think there's a feeling that the 2 programs are in very different spots right now. Even if you look at the actual results, sure, football has a winning percent. They've been over 500 the last 3 years. Well, no, 2018 they were exactly 500. They have not lost more games than they've won since 2017. So they've got 3 seasons running where they've been at least 500, if not better. Which the basketball program cannot say that over the last 3 years. But I think there's something to be said about the comparison, that football looks good in comparison to basketball. I also think that Kenny Pickett deciding to return even if it meant Mark Whipple was coming back with him. I think that Kenny Pickett's decision to come back to Pitt for one more season went a long way in helping the optimism and the good vibes around the program. But it's just interesting to me, and I've noticed this for a few weeks, and I've noticed this maybe even longer, maybe for the last month or 2 months or so, that people seem to generally be higher on the football program than they are the basketball program. And I don't think Saturday's blue-gold game at Heinz Field did much to hurt that sort of momentum or the way things were heading. And it's funny because, the blue gold game obviously ends up being a 30-0 win for the gold team. And, with how many touchdowns? 1, 2, 3, 4 offensive touchdowns scored. And I laugh about that because I'm pretty sure I said last week on the Panther-Lair Show, I know I said on the Panthers Insider Show on 93.7 The Fan on Saturday morning, I know I wrote about it in the 321 column on Panther-Lair.com last Friday, that you should not go into the blue-gold game on Saturday expecting any kind of offensive fireworks or effective offensive play at all. And I talked at length about how they drafted, the way they draft the players, they draft the offensive line, they get all mixed up. You get first team with second team and second team with third team and first team with third team and all over the place. And it's just a mess, and it leads to ineffective offensive play as a whole. And when you look over the years, we've seen some miserable spring games in terms of offensive production. And I know we're Pittsburgh, and I know defense wins championships, and we love all that stuff. But the reality is, what was that old commercial? Chicks dig the long ball. People like to see offense. People like to see touchdowns, especially in a spring game. And there have been a few people who came out of Saturday saying, boy, maybe it's just me, but I'm a little concerned about the defense. But by and large, people came out of Saturday saying, how about all that offense? And I didn't think we would see it. I didn't think there would be any offensive outbursts. I didn't think the blue or the gold would end up with what did the gold end up with? 396 total yards of offense. I thought, the blue with 171 yards of total offense, that would be like a high watermark. I didn't think either team would crack 200 yards of total offense. There was a year where the spring game was 3-3 until I think it was Dane Jackson had a pick six in the final minute of the game. And the final of the game was 10-3. It was miserable to watch, and nobody came out of that feeling great about the prospects for the coming season. Nobody was walking out of Heinz Field that day saying, well, I got questions about the offense, but let me tell you, this defense is going to be legit. I feel good about this year. Nobody said that. But coming out of this Saturday, where Pitt goes, at least half the team puts up 396 yards, 4 touchdowns, which, you've watched Pitt over the past couple of years. Getting 4 offensive touchdowns in a game is something of an accomplishment. If you score 30 in a game over the past few seasons, with the way Pitt's defense has played, they're going to do better than 7-7, 8-5, 6-5. They're going to do much better if they can get to 30. It's not that high of a bar to set, and yet this offense has had trouble getting there. So I think when people saw the gold team go for almost 400 yards and 30 points, saw Nick Patty and Davis Bevel combined to go 13 of 16 for 235 yards and 2 touchdowns, say, I will absolutely take that. Saw, a bunch of guys, some strong rushing performances. Saw some receivers and some tight ends make some nice catches. This is what people want to see. This is what will make people feel good about a team going into a season. And there will be people there have been people who came out of the blue gold game on Saturday saying, what about that defense, man? That defense, it looks like it has fallen off. But I think that's the minority of people who are saying that. And you can have some legit concerns. You can wonder about the defense a little bit. You can wonder about the kicking game a little bit. But I think by and large, people walked out of Heinz Field feeling some good vibes. Now, it was a beautiful day, and the weather was just right. And I don't know, did it ever even rain on Saturday? I know there was some talk about rain, but I don't remember seeing much rain. I know when I left Heinz Field, a little while after the game ended, it wasn't raining then. And so it was a pretty nice day. I guess it started raining by the time I got home. So it was a few hours after the game ended when it finally started. It was just a really nice day. But we've had, we've seen spring games on really nice days before, and they were just such a miserable performance that nobody really felt all that great walking out. I think people generally left Heinz Field feeling like, man, that's all right. I like what I saw. And I think the reason for that, and we're going to get into the comments and questions. I know you guys have a lot of things you want to say about the spring game. I think a big part of the reason that people maybe walked out of the blue gold game feeling maybe even better about the 2021 season than they did before Saturday is that we all know this year comes down to the offense. This year is about the offense improving. And that's what it's been the last few years. But here they've got a schedule where, yes, they've got Clemson, but that's the toughest game on the schedule, but it's kind of the only one that's really, you got to scale a mountaintop to win. You could talk yourself into Pitt having a pretty good chance against the other 11 teams on the schedule. And for a bunch of those teams, you can talk yourself into saying that Pitt really shouldn't lose that game. And that's the case often. But I feel like the schedule is set up nicely for Pitt this year. And I feel like if they can get their offense together, if they can score a little better, they're going to have some real success. And so we've all tossed these questions around all offseason. Can the offense improve? What's it going to take for this offense to get better? It's going to be the offensive line, and it's going to be the receivers and the tight ends and the running backs making plays. Feel confident about your quarterback. He's a fifth-year senior, 4-year starter. This guy should be able to competently and effectively run an offense. But his receivers got to catch it. His O-line has to open up holes, and his running backs have to hit the holes. Oh, and receivers and tight ends need to catch the ball when it's thrown to them. And so those are the questions we've all wrestled with throughout the spring and throughout the offseason. Can the offense get any better? Can the offense be good enough just by a little to get over the hump and instead of winning 7 or 8 games, win 8 or 9 or 9 and 10? Those things should be realistically in reach this season if the offense can just figure out how to not suck. And pardon my French, but I mean, it's almost 9 o'clock. And I'm still frustrated about the technical issues from earlier. So every now and then I let something like that slip. But I mean, look, the offense has held them back for the past 2 seasons. We'll just say 2019 and 2020. 2018, I mean, there were a lot of issues. I mean, there were a lot of different things that went wrong with that team. Ultimately, yeah, the offense was a problem, but the offense wasn't the problem when they lost at North Carolina. The offense was the problem when they lost to Stanford. There's no question about that. But that team still won the Coastal Division, so I'm not going to come down too hard on them. But 2019, 2020, when they won 13 and 10 over 2 seasons, with at least 4 games that should have gone the other way, should have been 17 and 6 over the course of those 2 seasons, should have won 10 games in 2019, should have won 8 games last year. And the reason they didn't win 10 games in 2019 and the reason they didn't win 8 games last year on an 11-game schedule was because of the offense. And so we've all looked throughout the offseason and will continue to look throughout the offseason for indications that this offense is going to get better. Because if the offense is going to get better, then the team should get better. The win total should improve. The level of success should, whatever levels do, increase, enhance. I don't know. So we're all looking for those signs. And when you walked out of Heinz Field on Saturday, you probably thought something, you probably had at least one, if not more of these thoughts. Like, number 1, looks like they've got a running back. Number 2, looks like they've got a tight end. Number 3, looks like they have receivers who can catch the ball and make plays. And by golly, if all 3 of those things are true, hell, if even 2 of those 3 things are true, then they're going to have an offense that can score and be pretty good. And I suspect that you walked out of Heinz Field thinking at least one of those things. I think everybody, I said 3 things there. I imagine that everybody walked out of Heinz Field, or everybody turned off the game if they watched on the ACC network. And at the end of it, probably everyone said, Israel Abanikanda is legit. Now, this is a guy who carried the ball 6 times. All right, he didn't go out and he didn't put in some workhorse effort. He didn't carry the ball 25 times, and he shouldn't carry the ball 25 times. Nobody should get 25 carries in a spring game. That's stupid. Not when you have this many running backs on the team. They've got Abanikanda and Davis and Davis and Davis and Davis and Sibley and Carter and Davis. They've got plenty of running backs. Nobody needs 25 carries. But nobody did with their carries what Izzy Abanikanda did with his 6. 77 yards. He had a 42-yard run. He had an 18-yard run. He averaged almost 13 yards per carry. And he looked, most importantly, he looked like the running back we all thought he was going to be coming into spring, not even coming into spring camp, coming into his college career. Roll back the tape. Listen to Panther-Lair shows from a year ago. Listen to Panther-Lair shows from 18 months ago. Read Panther-Lair.com content from a year ago. Read Panther-Lair.com content from 18 months ago. And I always said this. This was my point. That Pitt's running back room had Vincent Davis as this really fast guy who was a little smaller. And they had A.J. Davis, who was this sort of bigger, kind of stronger back, but wasn't as quick, wasn't as fast. And right in the middle, the Goldilocks of them all, was Izzy Abanikanda. He was bigger than Vincent Davis. And he was faster than A.J. Davis. And we can, you can throw in Todd Sibley, you can throw in Daniel Carter, but he fit as such a perfect sort of middle ground of those guys, of the two Davises. It just works out well to put him in between the two Davises because they got the same damn name. He was such a middle ground, a perfect middle ground of those two Davises. And I said, this guy could be the most well-rounded back on the roster and potentially the best all-around back on the roster. Now he goes into the season, he carries the ball less than 30 times, averages less than 4 yards per carry. I think he scored 1 rushing touchdown, had 1 receiving touchdown. His receiving touchdown, he kind of showed some of those skills, showed what he's capable of doing, but he ultimately never got good enough or reliable enough in pass protection that they could put him on the field all the time. I think coaches will always tell you if you have a running back who can't block, that you can't trust out there in passing situations, then you really can't use him in rushing situations because it becomes a tip-off to the defense of what you're going to do. Oh, they put the guy out there who's not a very good pass blocker. They don't really use him in passing situations because he's not a good pass blocker. This is going to be a run. You can't be a tell. And I get the sense that in some regard, Izzy Abanikanda was a bit of a tell last year because he wasn't really going to play in passing situations because they couldn't count on him to pick up the blitz. It's a year later now. He's had a whole spring camp. He had a whole season. He's had a whole spring camp, which he did not have last year. He enrolled in January, but he only got 3 spring practices. And by all accounts, he has improved his pass protection. Now, once you get that under control, once you have that mastered, or at least to the point where you're effective enough that the coaches can rely on you, now you can do those other things. Now you can get enough opportunities on the field to show those talents, to show how you're faster than Izzy or faster than AJ Davis and bigger and stronger than Vincent Davis. And he showed it. We saw it on 6 carries. And I think every person walked out of Heinz Field, or every person turned off the game on Saturday and said, I want that guy getting 25, 30 carries a game, 20 carries a game. That's the number one back. He looked like a number one back. He played like a number one back. He produced like a number one back. And it's been a while since Pitt has had one of those. Vincent Davis's outburst at Georgia Tech in the season finale notwithstanding, Pitt hasn't really, the only other time in the last 2 years they've had a 100-yard rusher was A.J. Davis at Syracuse in 2019, and he barely got over. He had like 105 or 106. It's quite a fall from 2018 when they had a pair of 1,000-yard rushers, or even 2017 when, Darren Hall went on a pretty ridiculous run. He had 200 and some at Duke. And then I think Virginia and North Carolina, he had 100 in those games as well. Really lit it up. But that was a long time ago. In the last 2 seasons, Pitt hasn't had that guy, hasn't had that number one back, that workhorse, every down back who could really be a threat to break a big, not just be a threat to break a big play, because Vincent Davis is a threat to break a big play, but a guy who looks like he can be a stud running back. And it was such an obvious comparison to bring up Le'Veon Bell when talking about Izzy Abanikanda. And, it was said in the press box during the Blue Gold game. After a few of his runs, Pat Narduzzi brought it up sort of unprovoked when asked about Izzy Abanikanda. He brought up Le'Veon Bell. You see some of that hesitation. Now, all that hesitation stuff only works if your O-line can open up some holes. If you're back there hesitating and trying to be patient to let the holes open up and your O-line's not going to block for you, then it doesn't matter how patient you are. You're just going to get tackled for more of a loss than if you just ran straight forward and crashed into your lineman. So you got to rely on that. And that's sort of underlining everything we're talking about here. Kind of the elephant in the room is really 5 elephants, and those guys need to block well up front. If that doesn't happen, then none of this matters at all. It doesn't matter if you have Izzy Abanikanda. It doesn't matter if you have Le'Veon Bell. It doesn't matter if you have Eric Dickerson. It doesn't matter if you have Bo Jackson when the guy was healthy. If you're not going to block, you're kind of screwed. But if those guys can block, Abanikanda is the best option. And he showed, I think he showed some glimpses of that on Saturday. And I think that, as much as anything else, was a cause for optimism. It did not hurt that Lucas Kroll caught 2 passes for 40 yards and a touchdown. It did not hurt that Jared Wayne had a really good game with 2 catches for 44 yards and a touchdown, or that Taysier Mack had 2 catches for 57 yards, or that Jalen Barden had 3 for 41, or Jordan Addison did 4 for 27, which is, you obviously like a little bit more yardage out of him, but seeing those guys show up in the receiving core and the tight ends, none of that hurt as well. I don't think there were any dropped passes, at least, not from those main primary players, the receivers and tight ends who are going to be getting most of the reps. But I think just Abanikanda was, eye-opening enough, impressive enough, that he created some extra optimism among the fan base that this is, some optimism that this offense is going to get it figured out this year and be better than they have been for the last couple of years when they've ranked outside the top 100, outside the top 110, I think, in rushing yards per game. Because if they get better at that, they get better at rushing yards, they'll be better at ball control, they'll be better at time of possession, they'll be better at play action, they'll be better at hitting passes down the field. And when they get into the red zone, they're going to have more options than just trying to throw the ball all over the place, which should help them avoid being one of the worst teams in the country at scoring touchdowns out of the red zone. A lot of good can happen with an effective running game. It starts up front with the linemen, but you kind of need a really good running back too. That's a good thing to have. And it looks like, finally, Pitt might have that with Izzy Abanikanda. And you know what? Vincent Davis, A.J. Davis, Todd Sibley, Daniel Carter, these are not bad guys to be working behind Abanikanda. And there could be, there very well, maybe, or maybe even will be games when Vincent Davis outgains Abanikanda. When Todd Sibley, maybe, out of the Wildcat or something, outgains Abanikanda. I could see these things happening. But I think he looks like your number 1 right now. And, even if Vincent Davis or A.J. Davis starts the first game, we'll see how the carries get, well, at least the first game against a real opponent, maybe the Tennessee game. We'll see, we'll look at who starts, but we'll look at who gets most of the carries and when they get most of the carries and how that situation plays out. That'll tell us who really is the number 1 back on this team. But I think you come out of Saturday saying, I think Izzy Abanikanda might be that guy. All right, let's jump into the comments and questions. Let's talk, see what you guys are thinking about the blue gold game. Brock Madonic, our friend, always gets to started off, says, who impressed you the most in the spring game on the offensive side and the defensive side? Yeah, Abanikanda obviously was one. Can't knock what the quarterbacks did. I mean, Kenny Pickett got limited opportunities, attempted 2 passes, played 1 series, which I think was all the intention ever was. They never planned to use him extensively in the spring game, and they shouldn't have planned to use him extensively in the spring game. I think they did exactly what they should have done. I would not even had him attempt 2 passes. If it was me, I would have had him hand the ball off 3 times and get out of there. But the other guys, though, Patty and Bevel, for the gold team. Patty goes 7 of 10 for 133 and a touchdown. Bevel goes 6 of 6 for 102 and a touchdown. And quite frankly, both of those guys looked better in the blue gold game than they have at any point in their Pitt career, at least when we've seen them on the field. And I say that as someone who thinks that, Nick Patty has made some big plays for Pitt. Nick Patty was, pretty good in relief of Kenny Pickett in the UCF game 2 years ago. He obviously led Pitt to a victory over Delaware in the following week, but that wasn't a great performance. And then last season, when he came in late in the Notre Dame game, mop-up duty because they were getting blown out, I thought he moved the offense pretty well. And then, a little bit later in the season, I guess the following game at Florida State, Kenny Pickett's still a little banged up. So when they're on the goal line, Patty comes in and runs the quarterback sneak a couple times for touchdowns. He was a touchdown machine. So he's shown some flashes here and there, but nothing that really made me feel like, yeah, he's the guy. He can run the show and lead this offense. But on Saturday, I thought he did it. I thought he was patient. He let receivers get open. His touchdown pass to Lucas Kroll was beautiful. He can move around a little bit. He can run. He's not as mobile as Kenny Pickett, but he can move around a little bit and keep a play alive. And I thought he did that and floated some nice passes out of sort of scrambled, not full on scramble drill situations, but rolling out and keeping the play alive. Thought he did well there. And I thought Davis Bevell did some of those things too. And it's interesting, TRR as the next question. Did you ever hear if Bevell played well in the scrimmages? He certainly made a case last Saturday for being the second string quarterback. The thing about Bevell, and I've said this before, I've said this spring, that, he's got all the tools. He's big, he can run, he's got a good arm, he's got the tools to be a good player. From everything we heard, he just hasn't been able to put it together yet. Hasn't been able to really take all those tools and sort of, create, like I say, put it all together. Is really the best way to say it. I can't really rephrase it. That's what it comes down to. And no, so to your question about have I heard if he played well in the scrimmages, I've heard that he was just okay in the scrimmages. I haven't heard a lot of rave reviews about Bevell, but he certainly looked the part on Saturday. 6 of 6 for 102 and a touchdown. I'd take that. He ran around a little bit, kept plays alive, ran twice for 10 yards and a touchdown. He had a 9-yard run and 1-yard run. He's got all the tools to be really good. It's just a matter of whether or not he can, like I say, put it all together. Again, I have to come back to that phrase because I think there are a lot of guys who have a lot of tools and they just don't. They can't make it all work when they get on the field. Now, he definitely had it working on Saturday in the Blue Gold game. Will he be the number 2 quarterback when the season opens? I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised to see. So, brief digression on the backup quarterback conversation. There are going to be a couple different things, all right? One is going to be the official depth chart that gets released. That first week of the season. My guess is it'll be Kenny Pickett, and then the backups will be listed, or it'll be Davis Bevell, or Nick Patty, or Joey Yellen. I think all 3 of them will get their names in the paper. So that's one thing, all right? There's 3 different sort of designations here for the backup quarterbacks. One is the official depth chart. And like I say, I think all 3 of them will be listed as with or designations on the depth chart. The second is if Kenny Pickett has to come out for a play or two, or he needs his helmet, something breaks on his helmet, or he needs to tie his shoe, or he gets the wind knocked out of him, or his helmet comes off, so he has to come out. This is the perfect example. Kenny Pickett's chin strap comes loose and his helmet comes off. I know this is a crazy idea. You can never imagine such a thing happening. Chin strap comes loose, helmet comes off. He has to come out of the game for a snap. Who goes in? All right, this is a different conversation. This is not necessarily what's on the depth chart because the depth chart has 3 guys listed as or backups. Helmet comes off. Somebody's got to go in. They throw somebody in there. All right. The third designation is the long term. Let's call it that. Official depth chart, short term, long term. Kenny Pickett, twists his ankle at Boston College, can't play at Miami. Who gets the start? That is who the real backup is. All right, and that might be the same guy that you put in for the short term, or it might be someone else that you look at. I think Pickett really didn't miss much time, if any, in that Boston College game when he got hurt. Did he? Or did Yellen came in for him? I forget exactly. Obviously, Yellen got the start the next week at Miami. But I think, when you're in one of those long-term situations, that gets kind of decided in the week leading up to the game. So Kenny Pickett gets hurt one week, either finishes the game or doesn't. They go into the next week. They realize Pickett's not going to be available for the following week's game. Then they decide kind of through the week, through practice, who's going to be the long-term backup. And that's who the real backup is. I could see a situation where they look at it and say, all right, Nick Patty, you go in a pinch. Kenny's helmet came off. Kenny needs a breather. Kenny hurt his leg. He's going to go, see the doctor. You go in and play this series. Nick Patty, you're the oldest guy. You're you've got the most experience and all that stuff. You go in, just take care of the ball. Try and keep the offense moving, but be careful, protect the ball. But then if Kenny Pickett has to miss extended time, they say, okay, now we might look at Bevel. Now we might look at Yellen. Now we might look at Patty. So I think when you're talking about the backup quarterbacks, like I said, I think there's a couple different designations for it. Could Bevel play himself into the short-term or the long-term role out of those three that I broke down, those three sort of separate backup quarterback designations? I think he could. I think Patty could. I think Yellen could. I don't think the coaches know right now who that true number two would be, the long-term backup option. I don't think they know right now. I think if they had to go into a game tomorrow, or this coming Saturday, I should say, I think they would have a better idea in mind of who they would go to if Kenny Pickett had to miss extended time. But they don't have to play a game this Saturday, so I don't think the coaches would have that answer right now. Because from everything we've sort of heard and we've written about it and talked about it, I don't think the backup quarterback showed a lot this spring to get the coaches all that excited. Now, spring game, they showed a little more. Spring game, Patty and Bevel looked pretty good. Yellen did not look good. Joey Yellen went 7-14 for 67 yards and an interception. He didn't look great. Nate Yarnell, the freshman, went 0 for 4, 0 yards, 2 sacks. So he had the roughest day of all. But Bevel and Patty, I think, definitely made their case. Let's see here. A few guys. Bart Simpson says, I'm really excited to see where the Pitt guys go in the draft. Good luck to all those guys. Colin Towle, same sentiments. Excited to see where the Pitt players get drafted this weekend. Have to think it'll help recruiting somewhat. Yeah, I really don't know what to expect out of the draft. I mean, there's so many different mock drafts. I know what I think of these guys individually, but you see some of the scouting reports that bring up a criticism of Rashad Weaver, criticism of Patrick Jones or Jalen Twyman or Paris Ford or Jamar Hamlin. So I'm kind of back and forth. I mean, obviously the higher they get drafted, the better. But I'm kind of at the point where as long as those guys' names get called, that's pretty impressive. I think if you can get as many of those guys drafted as possible, Jimmy Morrissey, Bryce Hargrove, maybe Alex Kessman, the more times Pitt gets called, the better it is. And, to Colin Towle's point about the NFL draft helping recruiting, I think that's probably the biggest impact is it's just kind of exposure. I always go back and forth about recruits who say, yeah, I want to go to that school. They can help get me into the NFL. They put guys in the NFL. And I think that's a recruiting talking point. I think coaches make that point to recruits. I think recruits sort of buy into it a little bit or talk about it. But when it comes down to it, for most of these recruits, I think they kind of believe they're already going to the NFL. I think they're humble enough to know that it'll take coaching. They need somebody to work with them. They can learn a lot from the coaches. I think defensive linemen coming to Pitt want to learn from Charlie Partridge. I don't think there's any question about that. I think, be another good example. Offensive linemen coming to Pitt want to learn from Dave Borbely, or quarterbacks want to work with Mark Whipple. They feel like these guys can get them better. But I think in their hearts, they believe that they're NFL caliber talent. And to that extent, I think most recruits feel like wherever they go, they're going to be able to get to the NFL. That often gets cited as a factor in recruiting. I just don't know if I buy it. I think it's below a lot of other things when it comes to why a recruit picks a school. Now, it's definitely not a bad thing. Don't get me wrong. It's definitely not a bad thing. You get, if you have players drafted and they're on ESPN or they're on the NFL Network talking about your school, saying Pitt, the next pick is Rashad Weaver, edge rusher from Pittsburgh. That's a good thing. Exposure is always good. I don't know if it plays in recruiting as much as sometimes we think it does. Byron Fleck says the blue gold game is touch football, signifying nothing. Yeah, you're right. That's a great point, Byron. They don't get to count that one in their record. They don't get to say they're 1-0 on the 2021 season. But you tell me this, man. All right. Did Izzy Abanikanda look like he could run the ball? Did Lucas Kroll look like he might be able to, be a little bit of a weapon out there? That catch Jalen Barden made when he reached out, the ball was just a little bit too far and he reached out and made that catch. That's a real catch, right? That's legit, isn't it? Jared Wayne plays he made. PJ O'Brien or Rashad Battle or MJ Devonshire plays those guys made. They don't count. You're not going to count their stats. But those are legit football plays. And I think I'm going to give them credit for that. I think we can. It might signify nothing. And look, we've seen plenty of spring games where the spring hero or the most improved player of the spring or whatever doesn't do anything during the season. There's no question about that. And I'm not going to pretend like we're guaranteed that Izzy Abanikanda is going to go for 1,500 yards or anything like that just because we saw him take 6 carries for 77 yards in the blue gold game. But I think you could see some natural talent on display there. I think you could see that that guy can play. I think you could see what Lucas Kroll should be able to present for this offense, the kind of matchup problems he should be able to create. I think you could see what these guys are capable of. And the great thing about the spring game, too, Byron Fleck, is you can take whatever you want from it. You really can. If you want to look at it and say, boy, this guy played great, go ahead. If you want to look at it and say, this guy played terrible, but it's okay, it's just a spring game, it doesn't matter, go ahead. If you want to say, man, the offense looked great, I think Pitt's going to be really good this year, go ahead. If you want to be on the negative side and say, oh, the defense gave up 400 yards to the gold team, that's not good, I'm worried about this defense, go ahead. You can, a blue gold game, a spring game, gives you opportunity to make whatever judgment you want. Literally anything you want to say, you could probably say it about the spring game. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. Let's see here. TRR says Kai Wright looked pretty good on his 2 catches. Is he one of these guys not being talked about who can make a big jump as a sophomore? And I'm curious to see what Kai Wright's able to do. I don't know. I think Lucas Kroll is still the guy. He's the number one guy, and he's the one they're going to try and get the ball to the most, who's going to he's going to be the one that they're going to try and create matchup problems with and try and take advantage of those, whether he's against the linebacker or against the safety. I think he can run really well, and he's got pretty good hands. He's obviously got the size. Look, and what did we see of Lucas Kroll last year anyway? We saw him in one game when he was already kind of hurt, and he got hurt during the game. Yeah, he dropped a pass in the game. He caught like one pass for 6 yards or something, got a first down out of it. I think he might have converted third down. But I think he's going to be a main focal point of this offense as long as he stays healthy and stays on the field. They're going to want to have another tight end out there, whether that's Kai Wright, whether it's Danny Marega, whether it's Grant Kerrigan playing as a jumbo tight end. They got some options on how they want to go about it. They got some options on who they want to put out there. I like Kai Wright a lot. I think I like his sort of athletic profile. When you look at what he did in high school, he played quarterback. He ran the ball. He threw the ball. He played defense. He was all over the place, doing a lot of things. And I think a guy like that, if he is adapted to the college game, if he knows the playbook, he understands what he's supposed to do, I think he could be a real weapon for you. I don't know if he's there yet. So I don't know if he's going to take a step this year or it's going to have to be a little bit further down the line in his career. Brock Madonic says, out of a deep receiver room, who do you see surprising people who wasn't getting talked about a lot in the spring? One guy that has stood out to me. I mean, I've been beating the drum for Jalen Barden for a long time. I've talked about him a lot. I think he can be a stud. I think he can be a playmaker at receiver. I think he can make a big impact for this offense. And I thought he played pretty well in the spring game. One guy that I just sort of always would kind of offhandedly mention and didn't really dig into was Jared Wayne. And I probably should give him a little more credit. I mean, you got Jordan Addison, you got Jalen Barden, Taysir Mack, Shockey Jacques Louis. Who else they throw out there among the receivers? Will Gibson got some run. Trey Tipton's back. Those guys are all nice players. I think they're all not nice. I said that wrong. They're all good receivers. Varying degrees of talent, varying degrees of ability, varying degrees of effectiveness as playmakers. None of them really have the size that Jared Wayne has. He's the tallest receiver on the team. He's going to be among the scholarship guys. He's going to be the tallest receiver on the team among the scholarship players until Jaden Bradley arrives this summer, the true freshman who's really tall. But Wayne, with his size and his body, he's just such an ideal possession receiver. And he's a guy that I think is going to move the chains a lot for this team in 2021. I think especially if you can run him out there with Lucas Krull also on the field and have both of those guys attacking the middle of the field, in different ways, probably working off of each other and working off of the outside receivers as well. I think you can get a lot of third down conversions attacking the middle of the field with those two. And, the best part of that is if you're really effective attacking the middle of the field with Wayne and Krull and defenses have to adjust, you're going to get some really juicy matchups for Addison and Mack and Barden, all over the place. So I think Wayne is a guy who could be pretty surprising. I think, Jordan Addison's going to be your number one wide receiver. After that, you're going to have guys like Barden, Mack, Krull in there. And I think Wayne's going to be right in the mix among the top 3 or 4 players on the team in catches, if not higher, if not among the top 2 or 3. I think he's going to be really good. So I would point to him. Byron Fleck, another comment, same old. I'm a 1976 Pitt grad. Here we go again. This year's different. Tell us why, compared to the last 30 years, Pitt football will be different this year compared to the last 30. I don't know if it will be. Look, we can go back over the last 30 years and find plenty of opportunities for Pitt to have won more games than they have. I always point back to the 2012 season. They went 6-7 in 2012. They lost to Youngstown State, right? That's one win they should not have lost. They lost to UConn in a game they should not have lost. That should have been, 8-5 right there. An 8-5 flip. You could go back. The 2008 team is another one that I always like to talk about. They went 9-4. Pretty good season. They lost to Bowling Green. Should have been 10-3. They lost a game to Rutgers that they really had no business losing. That would have been 11-2. And then, of course, the Sun Bowl at 3-0 loss, which they wouldn't have been in the Sun Bowl if they won 11 games in the regular season. They were 11-1. Who knows where they would have ended up? Perhaps in the BCS. But potentially an 11 or 12 win team there. There are plenty of opportunities over the years to find where you could say 2019, 8-5 team should have been 10-3. Last year 6-5 team should have been 8-3. 2018 7-7 team should have been 9-5 at worst. You can go year after year and find ways that each team's record should have been better than it was, and probably, Byron, what you would say is, yeah, but the records weren't better than they were, and that's why I don't know why we should expect Pitt to be any better this year. And you're right, but you know what? Why not? I guess that would be the answer to the question. Why would it be different this year? Why not? They've got a winnable schedule. They've got a fifth-year senior coming back at quarterback. They've got some talented offensive skill players. They've got their most talented and most deep offensive line in at least 5 years, I would say. Most deep. Their most talented and deepest offensive line in at least 5 years. They've got a defense that lost some key pieces. No question about it. You lose Rashad Weaver, Patrick Jones, Jason Pinnock, DeMar Hamlin, and Paris Ford. That's a lot to replace. But they've recruited well on defense over the years. Why not this year? Why not this year they win 8 or 9 in the regular season plus a bowl game? And put together their first 10-win season since 2009, which was their first 10-win season since like 1981. Why not? And don't just say because it's Pitt. That's lazy. Give me an answer why this team won't have that kind of success or shouldn't have that kind of success. The schedule's winnable. Talent's there. Go do it. Why not? All right, let's see here. Scroll down. Get a couple more comments before we get out of here. Brock Madonic says, can we expect to see Todd Sibley more involved this year for once? He has plenty of talent, just has to stay healthy. I don't know what's up with Todd Sibley. I really get the impression that the coaching staff feels like he's not one of their best backs. But the thing is, the thing is, whenever he's gotten an opportunity, he's produced. Whether it's out of the Wildcat, whether it's out of the base offense, he's produced. And, they obviously feel better about A.J. Davis. They obviously feel better about Vincent Davis. And I would suspect when we get into this season, we'll find out that they feel better about Izzy Abanikanda. It'll be interesting to see what they do when they go to, look for more of a power running game. Are they going to go to Daniel Carter over Todd Sibley? But, the guy produces. Limited opportunities, but he goes out and makes things happen. And if we want to get excited about Izzy Abanikanda going 6 for 77 with no yards lost and, almost 13 yards per carry, we should probably talk about Todd Sibley going 6 for 56 with a touchdown. No yards lost. 9 yards per carry. I can't. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what the explanation there is other than the coaching staff just doesn't feel that he's among their best options. So we'll see what this year brings. I still think Abanikanda has the potential to be their best option if he continues to progress and develop. Let's see. Royce Beacom, longtime live stream viewer. We appreciate it, Royce. I feel like you've been around since the beginning. Prediction on what the loss of Carson Van Lin will do to the expected overall of the offensive line. So, yeah, Carson Van Lin went into the transfer portal on Monday. Redshirt senior offensive lineman, a guy with plenty of experience over the last few years. And it's interesting because I look at the Van Lin situation. He's a good player. He's going to end up at a Power 5 school. I'm pretty confident about that. And wouldn't be surprised if he ends up starting for a couple years at a Power 5 school. I think he's a pretty good offensive tackle who potentially could even play guard. I thought he would be I think they even said he took some snaps, at center this spring. I think he can play. I think he could be good. I thought he'd be in the competition for one of the tackle jobs this year. Obviously, he didn't feel like he was really getting a real shot at it. Didn't feel like he was going to crack the 2 deep or at least crack the starting lineup. And so he's going somewhere else. And the biggest thing I took out of that situation, the biggest thing I took out of Carson Van Lin's decision is that Pitt is in a position right now, this year, where they can have a redshirt senior offensive tackle with a fair amount of experience over the past couple of seasons transfer, and it doesn't crush them. And he goes because of the talent and the depth that they have. Right now they've got Carter Warren, who's started over the last 2 years. They got Gabe Hoy, who's got starting experience from the last 2 or 3 seasons. And they got Matt Gonsalves, who might be one of the, potentially is the most talented offensive lineman on the team. And those 3 guys are competing for the 2 tackle jobs. And that's why Carson Van Lin seemingly felt squeezed out. That's some really good talent and depth. And then you got Branson Taylor, who's a second-year player. I forget if they're listing him as a redshirt freshman or a sophomore. But they got Branson Taylor, who is a second-year player who saw some snaps last year as a jumbo tight end. I'm hearing he might be a legit player too. Maybe, equal to or past Van Lin on the depth chart. So, Carson Van Lin, I hate to see him go. I think he was a really nice kid. I think he was a good player. I think he could be a really great depth lineman, a depth tackle for Pitt. But I think it's testament to what they've got on the offensive line and what they've built on the offensive line that he made the decision that he made. All right, a couple more quick questions before we jump out of here. Talk is Pitt says, we lose a lot on defense after this season, so I hope we get good linebackers. Yeah, I mean, you want to look ahead. You want to look ahead to next year. Yeah, they're going to have some holes to fill at linebacker. Phil Campbell's using his super senior year this year, so he's going to definitely be gone. I would expect Cam Bright probably won't come back for an extra season. Chase Pine will be done. So you'll have Wendell Davis coming back. John Patrician finally will be done. He's in his 7th season this year. So out of your projected 2 deep for this season, you'll have Wendell Davis back, who should be the starting middle linebacker this year, and Servassier Dennis. So you're going to have 2 out of your 3, starter caliber players return. Or 2 of your starter caliber players out of like the 6 that are going to be on your 2 deep this season. However, in addition to Davis and Dennis, you're also going to have Bengali Kamara and Solomon DeShields, who I think are going to be really, really good. I think they're going to push for playing time this season. They might be limited in what they do in the actual defense just because of guys like Bright and Campbell and Dennis. But I think those guys are going to be studs. I think they're going to show out on special teams. They did show out on special teams last year, and I think they're going to be studs this year. On special teams again, and potentially even force their way into the rotation at outside linebacker, and then be a big part of it in 2022. So there's good talent there, and then there's Aiden Henningham and AJ Roberts. There's some good young linebacker talent on this defense. I think that position group I think is going to be pretty solid for a few years. I think they've recruited that spot well. The real test is going to be seeing what they've got this year, this 2021 season, at basically the rest of the defense. Feel great about the linebackers. I think the linebackers is one of the strongest positions on the team, not just the defense, on the team. But we got to find out what they got at defensive end. We got to find out what they've got at corner, although we have a pretty good idea there with Damari Mathis and Marquez Williams and A.J. Woods. We've seen those guys, Rashad Battle. And we got to find out what you have at safety. You've seen Eric Hallett. You've seen Brandon Hill. MJ Devonshire's obviously played some college ball, but you're going to have to see those guys come together and really kind of step in for Hamlin and Ford and, try to minimize the drop-off. All right, final question. William Schroeder says, what area or areas does Kenny Pickett need to improve to better position himself in next year's draft? The first thing I would say, I think, is pocket presence. Kenny Pickett's been under a lot of pressure over the last couple years. I don't think there's any question about it. Certainly going back to 2018, but even in the last 2 years when they got better at better at pass blocking, Kenny Pickett has been under pressure. He hasn't always had a clean pocket to play out of. That said, I think there have been plenty of times, when Kenny felt pressure that wasn't there and responded and reacted to pressure that wasn't there. And he had more time in the pocket than he thought he had. And, he probably got out of the pocket or scrambled around or took his eyes off of downfield and looked at the pressure, even though the pressure wasn't really there. And he needed to trust his blocking more. He needed to trust the protection to hold up more and keep his eyes downfield to find those receivers getting open. I think that's one step. I think that's one thing he has to do better. You're not going to have 4.5, 5 seconds every time you drop back. You're going to have to be a little bit quicker with it, and you're going to have to feel the pressure, and you're going to have to trust the protection. The O-line can go a long way in helping that by protecting him better. But he's going to have to improve in that regard. I also think he can put a little bit better touch on his passes. We always talk about the dropped passes, and that's been a problem. There's no question about it, and it's largely on the tight ends and the receivers, but not every pass has been thrown maybe as catchable as it could have been. Not every pass is going to be perfect. You're going to have to catch some tougher balls, but he could do a better job in that regard. He could do a better job at making the passes catchable for his receivers and tight ends. But overall, I think it's a great thing to have Kenny Pickett back. I think it's going to help them a lot. And, I would look for Kenny to have his best season yet. I really would. Be my expectation. All right, I think we got about an hour in here. I really appreciate everybody who jumped in with the questions. It was great to hear from you guys. Lots of good questions and comments. We didn't talk any basketball. because nothing has happened on the basketball front. We'll keep an eye on those things. And, of course, if anything big happens, we'll fire up the live stream dream machine to come and chat with you about things. But, make sure you stay tuned to Panther-Lair.com throughout the week, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. It's the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, recruiting. You find it all at Panther-Lair.com. And, of course, you can discuss all these Pitt topics on the message boards. Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. Home Field Apparel, make sure you go check them out, homefieldapparel.com. They got great Pitt gear. It's high quality, super soft t-shirts, super soft sweatshirts, super great logos and graphics and designs and marks. You want to definitely go and check that out because they do a great job, and they support us, so you should support them. Don't forget, Saturday mornings at 8 a.m. on 93.7 The Fan, we have the Panthers Insider Show. So if you like Pitt sports talk, and I assume you're watching this live stream and listening to this podcast because you do, then you should tune in to the Panthers Insider Show and, get a little more Pitt sports talk this time on the radio. You're driving around in your car, you can listen to that show. 8 a.m. Saturday mornings, 93.7 The Fan. All right, you have a great rest of the week. Really appreciate everybody who tunes into the live stream, listens to the podcast through the week. Enjoy the rest of the week. Enjoy the weekend. We'll be back next Tuesday night at 8:30 p.m. right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com for the Panther-Lair Show. Have a great week, everybody. We will talk to you again soon.